Welcome to Biology Made Easy. Today we are discussing why cell membranes are selectively permeable. And when we talk about cell membranes, we look at the cell surface membrane and the cell, that's the cell surface membrane. And we also look at organelle membranes. You have organelles like mitochondrion, vacuole, Golgi body, and the rest. Here we have a mitochondrion, you have a Golgi body, and vacuoles. They all have membranes. And the cell surface membrane and the organelle membranes, basically, this is the structure of the membrane. Slight difference, the cell surface membranes have glycoproteins and glycolipids that are stuck on the surfaces that track antigens that is around so that immune systems can be generated to deal with non-like substances that come close to the cell. So if we remove the glycoprotein and the glycolipids, the cell membrane, the organelle membranes, all membranes, basically like this. So now I want to home in why are cell membranes selectively permeable if all of them are the same structure like this. Now, one, cells are different. So cells are different in structure and function. Well, the embryonic cells are the same, as you remember. But if you have an embryonic cell, cell differentiation occurs, and so the cells develop different structures and functions. And so you can have muscle cell, nerve cell, epithelial cells. And all cells need nutrients in and waste out of the cell. The nutrients, you can have food substances, amino acids, glucose, etc. You can also have hormones, you can have enzymes, you can have various ions. Those are the nutrients that go into the cell. Let's not forget water. And then you can have waste that should go out of the cell. Every cell, you have carbon dioxide, you have nitrogenous waste, and you have excess of substances like water, ions. They should go out for all cells. But different cells need different quantities and different types of nutrients. This is a point to note. Different cells need different quantities and different types of nutrients to perform their specific functions. For instance, muscle cells need a lot of calcium, nerve cells need a lot of potassium, sodium, and chloride ions. Epithelial cells need various ions, very little quantities. You see how epithelial cells are so tiny? Then another point why cell membranes are selectively permeable is that different cells need different nutrients at different times under different conditions. For instance, muscle cell need calcium, but a muscle cell that is actively working like person running, the amount of calcium that the person will need will be different when the same person is sleeping. So, different quantities of different nutrients at different times or conditions will require the same membrane to selectively reduce or increase the substances it's transporting. Now, the membrane itself, because it needs to be selectively permeable depending upon the cell type, depending upon the situation of the cell, the function of the cells, and the conditions the cells are in, these membranes will have to change how it's conducting substances. So this membrane has transmembrane proteins that are specific in the substances they carry. So you have this globular protein, this channel protein, this an alpha helix protein, this a carrier protein, and these are globular or peripheral proteins. But these transmembrane proteins, they are specific, so they are selective in the substances they transport. For instance, You have carrier proteins that transport specific metabolites, so makes it selective because you have carrier proteins that will carry sodium potassium, and it's called the sodium potassium pump. Glucose transporters, they will transport only glucose. Amino acid transported proteins that will transport only amino acids. We have what we call ABC transporters and carry many different substances across membranes. And then we also have channel proteins. This is a channel protein that also allows substances to go across, but selectively, because you can only have a channel protein that will only allow sodium ions to pass through. You have some that specifically will allow calcium to pass through. You have some that will allow water to pass through, called aquaporins. So membrane proteins are selective in the substances they transport across the membrane. Besides being specific or selective in what they carry, the transmembrane proteins cannot carry any substance until they receive a signal. So they need to receive a signal, stimuli, to be gingered into action, and that makes it selective, because until the signal is given, the channel protein cannot allow any substance, even if it's carrying calcium. It hasn't received the signal to carry the calcium, it will not carry the calcium across, and that makes them selectively permeable. So what types of signals? You have signals like binding proteins, enzymes, hormones, signals like voltage changes that affect nerves, like mechanical stress. All are signals, light. They are signals that cause the transmembrane proteins to selectively work. So another major reasons why cell membranes are selectively permeable is the phospholipid bilayer. That is it. You know the phosphate area here are hydrophilic, water-loving. The middle lipids are hydrophobic, and inner here, phosphate, is hydrophilic. So the substances that can go through the phospholipid bilayer, substances need to be very tiny, small molecular weight like water and some amount of solutes like sugar. They can pass through tiny holes that can avoid the hydrophobic that will repel the ions. So the structure of the phospholipid bilayer makes it selectively permeable because not all ions can pass through and avoid the hydrophobic inner layer. Then the structure of the membrane that have cholesterol in various areas also makes the membrane selectively permeable, because when temperatures rise high, then the cholesterol will react to cause the phospholipids from moving away, to increase the permeability or to make the membrane more fluid. So the cholesterol makes sure that the pores, the fluidness or substances that can get through pores are selective, because it makes sure that the membrane pores are not too large when temperatures are high, and then makes sure that when temperatures are low, the cholesterol prevents the phospholipids from packing too closely together, and so it ensures that the pores size are controlled. Another thing that makes the membrane selectively permeable are these peripheral proteins, and the peripheral proteins are water soluble. They can be formed, they can be dissolved based on the conditions that is happening inside or outside the cell. So that also makes it selectively permeable. If the conditions ensure that some metabolites like some proteins, some hormones should come, peripheral proteins that will need to be formed to see to that will be formed. So these peripheral proteins are affected by pH, ionic concentration inside the cell, outside the cell, and so the cell is not constantly fixed on doing the same thing, so it's selective. It adjusts itself to allow substances to go in and out and makes it selectively permeable. So we have the proteins doing their bit to make sure that the membrane is selectively permeable. And as we said, it's not only the cell surface membrane, but the membranes of the organelles too. For instance, if you have a mitochondrion and the mitochondrion needs more oxygen and more glucose than another organelle, and so the membrane of the mitochondrion here will be adapted, or it will change how it works to allow more oxygen and glucose to come in. Meanwhile, another membrane like the Golgi bodies, they are packing proteins and lipids. And so the membranes, what they will selectively allow will be different from what the mitochondrion is allowing in and out. So this brings us to an end of our discussion on why cell membranes are selectively permeable. One of these days, we'll have a quiz, a short test on all that we are discussing. If the lesson has been useful, give us your likes and kindly subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much. Goodbye.